Hi, I'm Anish with NVIDIA, and I'm here with Jeremy Howard from Answer.ai. Today, I'm here to ask Jeremy a couple of questions right after his keynote at the PyTorch Conference. So, Jeremy, to begin, what's been the biggest takeaway or highlight from the PyTorch Conference this week?
Yeah, the highlight for me is in some ways a low light, Anish, which is that I've discovered that everybody here talks about, they all want to talk about agents. And to me, PyTorch was always built for, we really took to it because it's so human friendly. It
Yeah,
was all about supporting developers and allowing humans to express themselves. The idea that we should be having an agent that we outsource the work to feels against what I understand PyTorch as being all about,
yeah,
you know? So for me, I really hope that the dialogue starts to shift back towards where we were when PyTorch first came out, and we all said, well, this is great, because before that, TensorFlow was taking over, and TensorFlow was all about like, let's make it easier for the computer.
right.
And Sumith and Adam were like, no, let's make it easier for the developer, for the human. And that's why they won. That's why PyTorch won, because it was all about how can we support people
Right.
better. So I've been disappointed, to be honest,
Yeah.
to see how, particularly the PyTorch community, which really should be all about supporting people, has, the folks here at the conference, a lot of them are really focused on like, how do we make the machines take over?
Yeah, that makes sense. In your keynote, you talk quite heavily about like, let's not delegate agency to these agents, right? And that's something that struck me pretty heavily because, so many companies and CEOs are talking about how, agents are going to replace workers and we're seeing these mass layoffs. And, people who I went to college with are like, hey, like, are our futures, kind of cooked, right? So recently, you launched Solve It, right? And I was pretty intrigued by it because
Oh, cool.
it was so it was inspired by, like the George Polya book, like
Yeah,
that 4-step decision process on how to actually solve from like basically first principles,
yeah,
right? So I'm curious, like, how is Solve It, giving agency back to
right.
people trying to learn in general? Like, how do you suggest like young people entering into the workforce, or even people who've been in the workforce for a while, who are like struggling to like understand their future with the uprising of agents per se?
Yeah. So I think people who go all in on agents right now are basically guaranteeing their obsolescence. And the reason is like one of two things is going to happen. Either like we get AGI, ASI, we're obsolete, in which case it doesn't matter what you
Right.
do now. I don't think that's likely, but it could, right? To be more likely, that doesn't happen. In which case, if you've outsourced all of your thinking to computers for the last few years, you've stopped becoming a more competent human being. You've
Right.
stopped upskilling. You've stopped learning.
Yeah.
You've wasted your time, and you're going to be in a group of people that is of no use to anybody.
Yeah.
AI is actually great at helping you learn.
Yeah.
You can ask it to, find good resources for you, to help you with misunderstandings. So I would say also, if you're running an organization, if you go all in on agents, there's a good chance in 2 years' time that will turn out to be the decision that destroyed your company. And the reason why is that if in this quite likely future where we don't have short-term AGI,
Right.
etc., what's happened is you've created much, much more code that fewer and fewer people understand,
Yeah.
that you can't build on top of. You got 2 weak wins of like 18% faster,
Yeah.
but in 2 years' time, you end up with a massive spaghetti
Yeah.
that people look around the company and say, we can't make anything anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of like happened when lots of companies used to outsource their work to
Right.
big contractors, and at some point they went like, we forgot how to do it ourselves.
Right.
So with Solvert, what we're trying to do is say, here's an environment and here's a technique for working with AI where the human is the agent, where you have agency, where you're in control, and you ask the AI for small pieces of help, and that help is particularly focused on helping you learn enough to do the next piece yourself.
Right.
And then this way, you are becoming more and more effective at your job, and your ability to have agency
Yeah.
is increasing and increasing.
Yeah. So, I mean, this seems like a fantastic way to put like the agency back into developers' hands. But there's so much more than just developers, right? So, do you have any takes on how people outside of just, coders or programmers can actually, use the same method but in their respective fields?
Yeah, so we use this solve it approach now in our company for everything we do. We do it for our writing, system administration, business strategy,
Yeah.
project management. Like, and none of these things are we outsourcing it to an AI. But in all of these things, I'm keen to find out, so communications, for
Hmm.
instance. I try to collect all of the things necessary about something I want to communicate to my staff.
Yeah.
AI can help me find, like, hey, where are the places I've talked about this? What are all the things related to that? What have some of my team said about these things? Okay, like, make a list of everything that we'll need to cover. And then, like, I write everything
Yeah.
myself, but I'm getting this kind of like it's like having a supercharged executive assistant
Yeah.
that has read and remember everything our company's ever done.
Yeah.
So we've invested heavily in making sure all of our communications are archived and AI available and ready to retrieve. You
Wow.
know, um, my co-founder Eric Rees is writing his next book in Solve It.
Wow.
The AI does not write the words.
Yeah.
This is Eric's book.
Yeah.
Eric wrote every word.
Of course.
But Solve It helps him like identifying, facts that haven't been properly cited, or identifying awkward transitions,
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
identifying places where something in the introduction was not supported by the rest of the chapter text, or so forth. So
Yeah.
it's all about using AI to support you at your craft.
Yeah, yeah, and it retains the humanness of like the work that Eric's creating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So pivoting a little bit, you're one of the goats of machine learning. So you've been in this space for over 2 decades, just working on some very foundational things. And so given like this post ChatGPT era where we've seen like explosion of like deep learning, how has this experience that you've had in like deep learning and machine learning in general helped you separate like the hype from like the actual groundbreaking techniques that have come? Because it seems like every other week there's this new groundbreaking technique that we all need to go learn about and figure out how to implement immediately. And so how have you been able to separate, I don't know if it's necessarily fact or fiction, but just noise from like what is actually truly groundbreaking and pushing space forward?
I mean, you're a fast AI alum, so I'm sure hopefully you appreciate it. Like when you understand the foundations, it's actually not that hard,
Yeah.
right? Like you just you read the paper. So in fast AI, we teach people to read papers, to experiment with it, and we teach the underlying foundations so you can make a good call.
Yeah.
And so I just haven't found it difficult at all.
Yeah.
Like when somebody's like, here's a huge new thing, I'll be like, I'll check it out. I'll go and read the paper, I'll experiment with it, and then I'll kind of say like, yes, this does actually make a successful advance on this piece that previously wasn't very good, and I can use it in these places, and I'll try it out,
Yeah.
and then I'll try it out, and I'll see if it works well. Versus like, well, this is solving a problem that doesn't need to be solved, or this is solving a problem that somebody else already solved.
Right.
I think if you know the foundational principles, it's not difficult. Like one interesting thing is how today's fast AI deep learning courses, the content is largely the same as the 2017 one.
Yeah.
Like you might think like, oh, everything's changed.
Yeah.
It's like, no, it's deep learning. It's stochastic gradient descent.
Yep.
It's multiple layers of matrix multiplication followed by an activation function. Like
Yeah.
it's quite minor details that have changed
Yeah.
in practice.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess along that lines, like you noted that there's a ton of open source models coming from China. You mentioned Meta and Nvidia are doing a great job of publishing open models. What have been the techniques in the last like 6 to 9 months that have really got you excited and said, okay, we can continue to double down on these techniques to continue reaping the progress?
Yeah, I think like so Meta's done quite a bit of interesting work recently on trying to find more kind of hybrid retrieval approaches, and in fact, funnily enough, like both Meta and Nvidia worked on this kind of retro system a few years ago, where they kind of incorporated retrieval into the training itself. So those companies are both doing very interesting work and kind of like thinking about external memories and hierarchies of memories and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that. There's also some interesting work coming out of Stanford called cartridges, which is a similar idea, which is actually quite similar to something that DeepSeek came out with 2 days ago, with this idea
The
of
DeepSeek
using
OCR.
OCR as
Right.
a different encoding. I think there's a huge amount of room to make things more efficient.
Yeah.
I also am interested in the hybrid diffusion approaches. So our most recent previous course was on
Yeah.
diffusion,
Yeah.
and the idea of diffusion can kind of look at everything more holistically rather than auto-regressively and map out the general approach. And then an auto-regressive model can then fill in the details. I
Yeah.
think, Google's done some
Yeah.
interesting
Yeah.
work
Yeah.
there.
Hmm.
Also, a bit more specialized, but actually NVIDIA's work in speech to text with like Parakeet
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
really exciting. Like it's
Yeah.
just dramatically more efficient than anything else. So I use Parakeet on my Mac
Awesome.
now, and just having something that turns my speech into text almost instantly lets me just get my thoughts out very quickly, and then I'm kind of much more in the zone.
Yeah.
So when I teach, people are always like, Jeremy, I can't believe how you're using voice for everything, but it looked great. How do you do that? And I'm
Yeah.
like, you just download software, you use Parakeet, it just
Yeah.
works. It's
Oh.
like it's crazy good now.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great answer. So one of the biggest, I guess, open source opposition arguments is that one, it's not commercially viable, and the second is that it doesn't really align with safety. And so something I'm curious about is like, how can open source engineers and enthusiasts like me actually help with AI safety efforts? And what argument do you have against these people who say building an open source can't be commercially viable?
Well, we've heard it all before,
Yeah.
So if you're around in the 90s, early 2000s, that was what Microsoft were doing. Steve Ballmer was doing. He was the guy who coined the term like open source licenses are viral licenses, and this is a virus in your organization, and it's going to destroy your company, and it's going to destroy America's ability to compete on the global stage. That turned out not to be the case.
Yeah.
In fact, open source has been at the heart of America's success. America has been the foremost, jurisdiction where open source has taken off and has been widely used. So it's just empirically not true.
Yeah.
And of course it's not true. Like if you create something that you allow more people to use, to build on top of, to cooperate so that they each build on top of each other, obviously that's going to be better
Yeah.
than ivory towers.
Yeah.
And what about safety? Well, surely having more people be able to use a powerful technology is better than less, particularly if the less is only like rich and powerful people can use it.
Right.
Well, they're going to use it to become more rich and powerful. So it's going to be like, killer drones,
Yeah.
and it's going to be, global surveillance, and it's going to be horrible.
Yeah.
When you put technology into the hands of society as a whole, then people learn from it.
Yeah.
They defend with it. They become engaged with it.
Yeah.
You'll end up with less awful policies and
Yeah.
awful ideas when more people are engaged in the technology.
Yeah, yeah. Great answer. And finally, to end off, as I mentioned, I'm a fast.ai alum. That was super deeply transformational for me to even learn about this space. And so in general, as you talked about this AI becoming a worldwide technology that everyone needs to have at their fingertips, what is, the original conception of fast.ai and everything you're doing with Answer.ai now, like, how are you guys thinking about this, bringing this technology to even more people's fingertips, especially because you've been such a foundational figure for so many people?
Well, Anish, like you and I are both arts graduates, right? And so we both were in an environment where we weren't learning all this math and computer science, and so we had to learn it for ourselves. The vast majority of the world is like us. They didn't go and do computer science at Stanford, right? But that doesn't mean that people like us have nothing to contribute, right? You've ended up at NVIDIA, which is like, congratulations to you. You can't do much better than that. Like, to me, this is the foundational idea behind Fast AI that my wife and I wanted. Is we looked around the world in 2015 and said, there are 6 labs in the world that can actually create effective deep learning models.
Yeah.
They're keeping all the details themselves. I remember Rachel, my wife and co-founder at Fast AI, asked, I think it was Ilya. She asked Ilya at like a 2016 meetup, like, how do you, or maybe it's Krzyzewski, I can't remember. how do you actually do the transfer learning
Right.
in this like, oh, it must have been Krzyzewski because it's the ImageNet thing.
Yeah.
And he said like, oh, we don't publish that.
Yeah.
You know, that's just our kind of secret source.
Yeah.
So that's not okay.
Yeah.
You know, so we wanted to put the technology in the hands of everybody and let everybody contribute to it. You know, and here we are. You know, two arts graduates hanging out at the PyTorch conference talking about open source. I think it's gone pretty well.
Yeah, I would say so too. All right, well, Jeremy, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Anish.
Thanks so much for the great answers, and really look forward to everything you're doing.
Thanks so much.
We'll definitely be supporting, and yeah, we have a special surprise to share with you. Well, you've given us so much with Fast AI. You personally taught me so much, and so it feels so surreal to be able to do this. But on behalf of NVIDIA, really excited to give you a DGX Spark.
It's beautiful.
This is
Look
our
at that.
new prototyping device and local device that we've developed so that developers like you and I can just prototype at our desk without needing big data center GPUs. And so
Thanks, Anish.
hope you enjoy it. Hope it becomes super helpful as you're tinkering over the next few years and decade. But
It's
yeah,
a hefty thing. It's
yeah,
quite solid.
yeah, 100%.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.